In 1961, Ray Kroc paid two brothers named McDonald $2.7 million to walk away from the company that bore their name. They had built the system. He bought the name, the logo, the arches, and then he built an empire on a model economists at the time barely thought worth studying. Today, that model has created more millionaires than any company in American history. The paper trail is public. Most people never followed it. If that interests you, subscribe, because this channel covers what most people slept through. Part 1. Context. By the early 1950s, Richard and Morris McDonald had already done the hard part. Working out of San Bernardino, California, they had stripped down a drive-in restaurant into something faster and cheaper, 15-cent hamburgers. A kitchen built like an assembly line, a system they called speedy service. It worked. Customers lined up. Other restaurant owners started copying it. The brothers had already begun licensing the idea to a handful of operators by 1953. Then, in 1954, a salesman named Ray Kroc walked in. He sold milkshake machines for a living, and the McDonald brothers' single restaurant had ordered 8 of them, an unusually large order that made Kroc curious. What he saw was not just a busy restaurant. He saw a process that could be copied, store for store, city for city, with almost no variation. Kroc became the brothers' franchise agent in 1955. He opened a location in Des Plaines, Illinois, not as the first McDonald's, but as the first one built specifically to sell the model to other operators. Within 6 years, Kroc and the brothers were in open conflict over how fast to grow and who controlled the brand. In 1961, Kroc bought them out for $2.7 million, worth roughly $28 million today, adjusted for inflation. What Kroc inherited wasn't just a burger recipe. It was a structure. A franchise is an arrangement where a company, the franchisor, licenses its brand, its systems, and its operating manual to an independent business owner, the franchisee, in exchange for an upfront fee and an ongoing share of revenue. The franchisee runs the location day to day. The franchisor sets the rules and collects the cut. For 2 decades, this structure was barely studied. Through the 1970s and into the 1980s, most economists treated franchising as a minor financing trick, a cheap way for a company to grow without spending its own capital. It was filed under small business curiosities, not serious economic theory. But while academics looked away, the model was already rewriting the American economy. By the time anyone in a university economics department took it seriously, McDonald's alone had franchised thousands of locations. The structure that saved on capital had quietly become one of the largest employment and wealth creation engines the country had ever produced. Part 2. The Hidden Truth. Here is what the records show. McDonald's, as a corporation, makes most of its money not from selling hamburgers, but from collecting fees from the people who sell the hamburgers. According to McDonald's own disclosure documents, the legal filings every franchisor must give to prospective buyers. A new McDonald's franchisee pays a one-time franchise fee of $45,000. On top of that, they hand over roughly 4% of their gross sales every month as a royalty, plus another roughly 4% into an advertising fund, plus rent, because in most cases, McDonald's owns or controls the land and building and leases it back to the franchisee. Combined, these fees can take 12 to 15% of a location's revenue before the franchisee pays for food, labor, or anything else. That sounds like a one-sided deal. But the filings also show the other side of the ledger. The median McDonald's restaurant in the United States generates around $4.1 million a year in sales. After all costs, food, staff, rent, royalties, a single well-run location can leave its owner with somewhere between $150,000 and $550,000 a year, depending on the source and the location's performance. And the average McDonald's franchisee doesn't own one location. According to franchise industry data, the average owner operates around 8 restaurants. That's the part that doesn't make it into the press releases. This was never really about hamburgers. It was a wealth distribution machine built on real estate and repetition. McDonald's figured out that if it controlled the land, the brand, and the operating manual, and let thousands of independent operators run the stores, it could grow faster than any company that tried to own and staff every location itself. Today, McDonald's itself owns and operates only about 5% of its restaurants. The other 95%, roughly 13,000 in the U.S. alone, belong to independent owners. And McDonald's is not an outlier. It is the blueprint. Across the entire U.S. economy, the same structure has been copied into hotels, gyms, cleaning services, and tax preparation offices. As of the mid-2020s, the U.S. franchise sector includes more than 800,000 establishments, employs close to 9 million people directly, and accounts for roughly 3% of U.S. GDP, a figure that has been climbing for years. Part 3. The cover. Publicly, the story of McDonald's has always been told as a story about food, speed, consistency, the golden arches as a symbol of American convenience. Politicians use it the same way, as a stand-in for entry-level work. "I flipped burgers at McDonald's" is shorthand for humble beginnings, for the bottom rung of the ladder. What almost never gets said in that same breath is who owns the ladder. The official narrative treats McDonald's franchisees as small business owners in the generic sense, local, modest, interchangeable with a corner shop. The data tells a different story. Owning a McDonald's franchise requires, by the company's own disclosure documents, a minimum of $500,000 in liquid assets, with total startup costs ranging from roughly $1 million to over $2 million, depending on the location. 40% of that has to come from the buyer's own cash or unborrowed assets, not loans. This is not an entry-level opportunity. It is, and has always been, a vehicle for people who already have meaningful capital, or access to it, to convert that capital into a cash-generating asset with a recognizable brand attached. A humble burger job. Framing obscures a simpler fact. Franchising was, from the start, a system for the upper middle class and the immigrant entrepreneur with savings and nerve, not the teenager behind the counter. That second group matters. Records and academic research, most notably the work of sociologist Pawan Dhingra, document how Gujarati immigrants from India, arriving in the U.S. from the 1940s onward with limited capital and limited English, found that budget motels and fast food franchises required neither fluency nor connections, just labor, discipline, and a willingness to live on site. By the 2010s, Indian Americans owned roughly half to 60% of all budget motels in the United States. Chains like Days Inn, Super 8, and Travelodge, a multi-billion-dollar slice of the hospitality industry built almost entirely through the franchise structure that economists had once dismissed as a footnote. Part 4. The consequences. The scale of what this model became is documented in federal and industry data, and it is larger than most people assume. As of the most recent figures, the U.S. franchise sector contains more than 800,000 establishments, up from under 500,000 in 2017, according to U.S. Census Bureau figures cited by industry researchers. That's a jump of more than 60% in under a decade. These establishments employ close to 9 million people directly, with total economic output exceeding $900 billion a year, close to 3% of the entire U.S. economy, by some estimates closer to 9% when indirect effects are included. For McDonald's specifically, roughly 250,000 franchise owner-operators run the system's locations worldwide, with around 13,000 of those restaurants in the United States. The company's own materials and independent analysts have repeatedly described the McDonald's franchise system as having created more millionaires, and in some cases, more billionaires, than any other single company in American business history. through ownership of multiple locations and the real estate beneath them over decades. The flip side is also documented. Franchise ownership has a high failure and turnover rate. The same structure that creates wealth for well-capitalized operators also concentrates risk on the individual. If a franchisee's restaurant underperforms, they still owe McDonald's its royalty, its advertising fee, and its rent, regardless of how the location is actually doing. The franchisor's revenue is largely protected. The franchisee absorbs the volatility. That asymmetry, fixed fees for the franchisor, variable risk for the franchisee, is the engine. It is also the reason franchising scaled the way it did, spreading risk onto thousands of individual operators, each personally invested with their own capital. Let companies like McDonald's expand into tens of thousands of locations without ever raising that capital themselves. Part 5. What it means today. This is the reason franchising is expanding again right now, and into places that have nothing to do with food. As of the mid-2020s, rising university tuition and growing anxiety about AI, replacing white-collar jobs, have driven renewed interest in what's sometimes called hands-on or people-focused work. Businesses that depend on a physical location and a human being showing up, not a desk job that a language model might eventually do faster. Franchising is expanding into childcare, home health care, fitness studios, and personal services, sectors where the work is physical, local, and harder to automate. This is the reason the franchise model, once dismissed by economists as a financing footnote, is now one of the primary paths into business ownership in America for people who don't want to build a brand from zero. It's the reason nearly 1 in 30 U.S. jobs now sits inside a franchised business. And it's the reason the next wave of American millionaires may not be founders at all. They may be the people who bought the license, signed the lease, and ran the location exactly as the manual told them to. Most people slept through this. You didn't. Subscribe, because there's more.